Hello, y'all. It's me. It's Dr. G. Welcome to this bonus episode of Star-Spangled Studies. Picture this. Washington, D.C., February 25th, 1870. Inside the U.S. Senate chamber, the air crackles with anticipation. The galleries are overflowing, packed so densely, as one New York Times reporter put it, that, quote, there was not an inch of standing or sitting room, and to say that the interest was intense gives but a faint idea of the feeling which prevailed throughout the entire proceeding, end quote. On the floor below, Hiram Rhodes Revels, a minister, an educator, a former Union Army chaplain, prepares to take the oath of office. What makes this moment so electric, so historically charged? Hiram Revels is black, and he was about to become the first African-American United States Senator. The symbolism is almost overwhelming. Just 9 years earlier, another senator from Mississippi, Jefferson Davis, had dramatically walked out of this very chamber to become the president of the Confederacy, a nation founded, in the famous words of the vice president, Alexander Stephens, with slavery as its, quote, cornerstone. Now, in that same seat once occupied by the leader of the rebellion fought to preserve human bondage, stood a black man, born free but in a slave state, ready to present Mississippi in the reunited nation. As Nevada Senator James Nye declared, witnessing the whole scene, quote, "Sir, what a magnificent spectacle of retributive justice is witnessed here today! In the place of that proud, defiant man comes back one of that humble race whom he would have enslaved forever to take and occupy his seat upon this floor," end quote. So welcome to Star-Spangled Studies. In our main episode on Reconstruction, we explored the turbulent, transformative, and ultimately tragic era following the Civil War, the attempt to rebuild the South and redefine American freedom and citizenship from 1865 to 1877. Today, in this special bonus episode, we zoom in on the life and legacy of one remarkable figure who embodies both the revolutionary promise and the profound challenges of that era, Senator Hiram Revels. Who was this man thrust onto the national stage at such a pivotal moment? How did his journey from a childhood in antebellum North Carolina to the halls of Congress reflect the seismic shifts occurring in American society? Revels' story is far more than a historical footnote. It's a powerful lens through which we can examine the meaning of freedom, the fight for equality, and the contested memory of what we like to call America's unfinished revolution. His presence in the Senate was a testament to the radical possibilities unleashed by Union victory and emancipation, yet his brief tenure and the subsequent unraveling of Reconstruction underscore why the revolution remained tragically incomplete. Join us today as we explore the life of Hiram Revels and the complex tapestry of Reconstruction. So let's go. Hiram Rhodes Revels entered the world in Fayetteville, North Carolina in 1827, a time when the vast majority of black people in the South endured the brutal reality of chattel slavery. But Revels was born free. His parents were free people of color, possessing a mixed heritage that included African American, European, and possibly Native American ancestry. His mother was specifically known to be of Scottish descent. While freedom offered a status vastly different from enslavement, life for free blacks in the antebellum South was fraught with perils and severe restrictions. They existed in a precarious legal and social space, constantly navigating the dangers posed by a society built on white supremacy. Despite laws in North Carolina forbidding the education of black people, Revels received basic schooling from a local free black woman. At age 11, he moved to Lincolnton to live with his older brother Elias, an apprentice as a barber. This trade offered a degree of economic independence uncommon for many black men at the time. But Revels himself aspired for more. Seeking opportunities denied to him in the South, he traveled north in 1844, pursuing education with a determination that characterized much of his life. He studied at the Beech Grove Quaker Seminary in Indiana and another seminary later in Ohio before eventually attending Knox College in Illinois. This relentless pursuit of knowledge stands in stark contrast to the deliberate denial of education that was the cornerstone of the slave system and often extended to free blacks as well. Accessing education was not merely a personal betterment for Revels, it was actually an act of resistance and self-determination, equipping him with the intellectual tools that will define his future leadership. During his studies, Revels felt called to the ministry and was ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal or AME Church in Baltimore around 1845. The black church was a vital institution, serving not only as a spiritual center, but also as a hub for education, for community organizing and mutual support. As an itinerant preacher, Revels traveled immensely and extensively, ministering to black communities across Maryland, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Kentucky, and Missouri. His work, however, was not without risk or trials. In Missouri, a slave state, he was imprisoned in 1854 simply for, quote, preaching the gospel to Negroes, end quote. This incident underscored the constant threat under which even free black leaders operated. Revels himself acknowledged the need for caution in slaveholding states. He later recalled, quote, I sedulously refrained from doing anything that would incite slaves to run away from their masters, it being understood that my object was to preach the gospel to them and improve their moral and spiritual condition. Even slaveholders were tolerant of me, end quote. This pragmatic approach, born of necessity, allowed him to continue his ministry in slave states. However, in the free states, Revels actively aided fugitive slaves, demonstrating a commitment to freedom that adapted to the complex and dangerous realities of the antebellum, or between the wars, of the United States. This ability to navigate different environments, balancing principle with pragmatism, would later be a hallmark of his outstanding political career. The outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 presented both immense peril and unprecedented opportunity for African Americans. Revels, then serving as a pastor and high school principal in Baltimore, immediately threw himself into the Union cause. He played a crucial role in organizing 2 regiments of black soldiers for the Union Army, one in Maryland and another in Missouri. When the federal government finally authorized black men to fight in 1862, Revels served as a chaplain ministering to black troops fighting in Mississippi, including at the pivotal Battle of Vicksburg. His service extended beyond the battlefield and the pulpit. Recognizing the profound desire for education among those escaping bondage, Revels established a school for freedmen in St. Louis in 1863 and worked with the Provost Marshal's office handling the affairs of former slaves. Revels' wartime activities placed him directly at the heart of the transformative processes unfolding. The enlistment of nearly 200,000 black men was critical to the Union victory, and their service powerfully advanced the argument for citizenship and equality based on their valiant fighting. Revels' work recruiting soldiers, providing spiritual guidance amidst the horrors of the war, and establishing schools for the newly freed positioned him as a leader deeply engaged in the very foundations of Reconstruction, a process that, as our historians have argued, began not after the war but during the war itself, fueled by the actions and agency of African Americans themselves, seizing their freedom and demanding their rights, even as war is going on. His experiences during the war provided invaluable preparation for the challenges of building a new South in the conflict's aftermath and the pushback of white supremacy. At war's end, Revels eventually settles in Natchez, Mississippi in 1866. The state he entered, Mississippi, was reeling from Confederate defeats and the total upheaval of its social and economic order. Mississippi was the state with the highest percentage of enslaved people before the war, and thus faced a daunting future of incorporating black persons into the civil society. White landowners were resistant to the realities of emancipation, and they quickly enacted the notorious Black Codes in late 1865. These laws, as I described in our main Reconstruction episode, aimed to recreate slavery in all but name, restricting as severely as possible Black freedom of movement, of economic opportunity, marriage rights, and community segregation and legal rights. Mississippi's codes were particularly harsh, requiring freedmen to carry proof of employment or face arrest for vagrancy. It forbid them from renting land in rural areas, and it established systems of a forced apprenticeship for all Black children. This blatant attempt to restore the antebellum racial hierarchy provoked outrage in the North and led eventually to the intervention of the federal government through congressional, or what we call radical Reconstruction, starting in 1867. Under military supervision, new constitutions were drafted and Black men were granted the right to vote. This period, though, saw the rise of the Republican Party in the South, and it did so by the support of a coalition of Black voters, white Southerners who were loyal to the Union, who were derisively called scallywags, and Northerners who had moved to the South, who were known as carpetbaggers. The Freedmen's Bureau also played a critical role, providing aid in establishing schools and overseeing labor contracts. Amidst this turbulent political landscape, Revels continued his work as a minister, switching affiliations to the Methodist Episcopal Church, which he felt offered more opportunities in the South. And as an educator, he founded schools for Black children. His leadership qualities and moderate stance earned him respect, and in 1868 he was appointed as a Natchez alderman. The following year, encouraged by other Black leaders like John R. Lynch, he successfully ran for the Mississippi State Senate, where we started our episode. Revels was part of an unprecedented wave of Black political mobilization in Mississippi and the South. With its Black majority population, the state became a focal point for Reconstruction's experiment in interracial democracy. Over 220 Black men held public office in Mississippi alone during this era, a testament to the dramatic, if temporary, shift in political power. Revels embraced this moment, writing to a friend during his state senate campaign, quote, "We are determined that Mississippi shall be settled on a basis of justice and political and legal equality," end quote. His election to the state senate, fueled by the votes of newly enfranchised Black men and supported by some white Republicans, set the stage for an even more historic elevation. In January 1870, the newly reconstituted Mississippi legislature faced the task of filling the state's 2 U.S. Senate seats, which had remained vacant since Mississippi's secession in 1861. As I mentioned, one of those seats had last been held by Jefferson Davis, the former Confederate president. After several days of balloting and political maneuvering, the legislature, by a decisive vote of 81 to 15, elected Hiram Revels to fill the shorter, unexpired term ending in March of 1871. Black legislators had agreed to support Revels, believing his election would, quote, "be a weakening blow against color line prejudice," end quote, while some Democrats reportedly supporting him, hoping his presence would damage the Republican Party. Revels' arrival in Washington, D.C. was met with immediate opposition from the remaining Southern Democrats in the Senate. They mounted a challenge based on the Constitution's requirement that a senator must have been a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years. Their argument rested squarely on the infamous 1857 Dred Scott Supreme Court decision, which had declared that people of African descent, whether enslaved or free, were not and could not be citizens of the United States. According to this racist logic, Revels had only become a citizen with the ratification of the 14th Amendment 2 years prior in 1868, or perhaps at the very least the Civil Rights Act of 1866, therefore falling far short of the 9-year requirement. The debate raged for 2 days and it captivated the nation. Revels' Republican supporters countered the Democratic objections forcefully. They argued that the 14th Amendment, with its declaration that, quote, "all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens," had explicitly overturned Dred Scott's decision. Furthermore, they pointed out that Revels, being of mixed ancestry, might not even fall under the Dred Scott ruling, which some had interpreted as applying only to those of purely African descent. Crucially, they presented evidence that Revels had voted in Ohio years earlier, demonstrating that he had already exercised the rights of citizenship long before the 14th Amendment took place. The debate transcended legal technicalities, becoming a fundamental contest over the meaning of the Civil War and Reconstruction. Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner, a leading radical Republican, delivered a powerful speech that effectively ended the opposition. Quote, "The time has passed for argument. Nothing more need be said," Sumner declared. "For a long time it has been clear that colored persons must be senators." End quote. He invoked the nation's founding principles. Of course, all men are created equal, says the Great Declaration, and now a great act attests this verity. Today we make the Declaration a reality. The Declaration was only half established by independence. The greatest duty remained behind. In assuring the equal rights of all, we complete the work. End quote. Sumner's words captured a profound significance of the moment. Revels' election, coming just days after the ratification of the 15th Amendment, which prohibited voting discrimination based on race, led abolitionist Wendell Phillips to famously call him, quote, "the 15th Amendment in flesh and blood," end quote. The Senate voted 48-8 to seat Revels. On the afternoon of February 25, 1870, Hiram Revels was sworn in. The New York Times reported on this composure and his composure of this historic occasion. Quote, "Mr. Revels shows no embarrassment whatsoever, and his demeanor was as dignified as could be expected under the circumstances. The abuse which had been poured upon him and on his race during the last 2 days might well have shaken the nerves of anyone." End quote. The seating of Hiram Revels was more than just an admission of one man. It was a congressional affirmation of black citizenship. It was a repudiation of the Dred Scott decision. And it was a powerful symbol of the potential for a radically transformed American republic after the war. The intense public focus, the galleries packed with black and white observers, highlighted the immense symbolic weight of a black man taking his place in the nation's highest legislative body. Hiram Revels served in the Senate for just over a year, completing the term that ended in March of 1871. Despite the brevity of his tenure, he actively participated in the crucial debates shaping the course of Reconstruction. Less than a month after taking his seat, Revels delivered his maiden speech on March 16, 1870. The galleries were once again packed. The issue at hand was the readmission of Georgia to the Union. A controversial amendment to the bill threatened to undermine the rights of black Georgians recently elected to their state legislature, effectively seeking to bar them from holding office. Revels, acknowledging his newcomer status, felt compelled to speak. Quote, "Perhaps it were wiser for me to have remained a passive listener," he began. "But when I remember that my term is short and that the issues with which this bill is fraught are momentous, I would seem indifferent if I hesitated to lend my voice on behalf of the loyal people of the South." End quote. His core argument was a plea for federal protection of black rights. Quote, "I remark that I rose to plead for protection for the defenseless race that now send their delegates to the seat of government to sue for that which this Congress alone can secure for them," he stated. And he added, quote, "Here, let me say further that the people of the North owe to the colored race a deep obligation that is no easy matter to fulfill." End quote. Despite his eloquent appeal, the Senate ultimately passed the Georgia bill with the discriminatory amendment intact. Revels also took a strong case against segregation. During a debate over schools in the District of Columbia, over which Congress had direct jurisdiction, he forcefully argued for desegregation. When challenging the deep-seated racial prejudice, quote, "How colored people act, how intelligent they may be, how refined they may be, the prejudice against them is equally as great," end quote. He questioned the basis for this bias, asking, quote, "Have the colored people done anything to justify the prejudice against them?" End quote. He condemned prejudice as, quote, "wicked, wrong, not approved of by heaven," end quote, and he warned against the legislative actions that would encourage it. Drawing on the experience of New England states with integrated schools, he countered fears that desegregation would lead to unwanted social equality, arguing instead that it fostered friendship, peace, and harmony, while social separation persisted outside the classroom. He pointedly blamed school boards and transportation companies for actively perpetuating segregation through discriminatory practices, recounting his own experiences fighting for his family to ride in a first-class train car rather than the foul smoking car. While principled in his defense of equal rights, Revels adopted a more moderate, conciliatory stance on the issue of amnesty for former Confederates. He supported restoring political rights to ex-rebels, but only on the condition that they demonstrated genuine loyalty to the Union and accepted the laws of Congress, including the Reconstruction Acts. Quote, "I am in favor of removing the disabilities of those upon whom they are imposed in the South, just as fast as they give evidence of having become loyal and being loyal," he declared, end quote. This position reflected his broader political philosophy, which sought cooperation and reconciliation between the races. He often reiterated the message he had preached in Mississippi, quote, "that while I was in favor of building up the colored race, I was not in favor of tearing down the white race. Sir, the white race need not be harmed in order to build up the colored race," end quote. Revels' brief time in the Senate showcased the immediate and substantive engagement of black politicians in the nation's most pressing issues. He advocated for the civil rights, the educational advancement, and protection of his constituents, black and white, reflecting their core aspirations for freedom. His work securing jobs for black mechanics at the Washington Navy Yard demonstrated even more a focus on the tangible economic progress that could be made. His speeches reveal a complex blend of unwavering commitment to equality and a pragmatic desire for reconciliation in a deeply divided nation. After his Senate term concluded in 1891, Hiram Revels actually did not seek re-election. Instead, he returned to Mississippi and embarked on another pioneering role, serving as the first president of the Alcorn Agricultural and Mechanical College, now Alcorn State University, one of the earliest land-grant colleges established specifically for African Americans. His commitment to education, evident through his life, continued as he later taught theology at Shaw University, which is now known as Rust College. Revels' transition from the Senate back to education and ministry reflects the broader trajectory of Reconstruction itself. The era witnessed revolutionary achievements, the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments we talked about in the Reconstruction episode, and it fundamentally altered the Constitution by abolishing slavery, defining birthright citizenship, guaranteeing equal protection, and prohibiting voting discrimination based on race. Across the South, Reconstruction governments with significant black participation established the region's first public school systems, benefiting both white and black children. The sight of men like Revels, as well as Blanche K. Bruce, the second black senator who was also from Mississippi, as well as P.B.S. Pinchback, who was briefly the governor of Louisiana, and roughly 2,000 other black men who held office during Reconstruction, represented a stunning transformation and promise. Abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison captured the sense of wonder at the time by exclaiming, quote, "Nothing in all history equaled this wonderful, quiet, sudden transformation of 4 millions of human beings from the auction block to the ballot box," end quote. However, this moment in the sun, as W.E.B. Du Bois would later describe it, proved tragically brief. The forces arrayed against Reconstruction were powerful and ultimately proved overwhelming. White Southerners committed to restoring white supremacy resisted from the end of the war fiercely all Reconstruction efforts. The Black Codes were an early manifestation of this resistance. When congressional Reconstruction empowered black men politically, resistance changed and escalated into widespread terrorism. Vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan unleashed a campaign of horrific violence, targeting black voters, office holders, and their white allies, aiming to intimidate Republicans and restore white supremacy and democratic control. Albion Tourgie, a white Republican judge in North Carolina who bravely prosecuted Klansmen, provided harrowing testimony of the Klan's brutality in his district. Quote, 12 murders, 9 rapes, 11 arsons, 7 mutilations, 7 or 800 persons beaten or mistreated. He lamented the inability of the legal system to provide protection, stating, quote, murderers walk around with the blood yet fresh upon their garments, unharmed, unquestioned, and unchecked, end quote. Economic coercion also played a major role. The failure of the federal government to enact meaningful land redistribution meant that formerly enslaved people remained economically dependent on white landowners, many of them their former slave masters. The rise of the sharecropping system to replace slavery often trapped black families in cycles of debt and poverty, limiting their autonomy, creating a debt slavery system. Compounding these challenges was the erosion of support for Reconstruction in the North. The economic depression of 1873 shifted national attention away from the South and towards economic recovery on a national level. Many Northerners, after many years, grew wary of the seemingly endless conflicts and the costs associated with maintaining federal troops in the South. Added to that, racist ideologies, including social Darwinism, continued to gain currency, providing a pseudo-scientific justification for abandoning the cause of black equality, portraying African Americans as inherently unfit for citizenship and, according to social Darwinism, less than whites. The final blow came with the disputed presidential election of 1876 and the Compromise of 1877. Rutherford B. Hayes was awarded the presidency in exchange for the withdrawal of the last federal troops from the South. This effectively ended the federal enforcement of Reconstruction policies and signaled the abandonment of black Southerners to the control of white Redeemer Democrats. As Louisiana freedman Henry Adams starkly observed, quote, the whole South had got into the hands of the very men that had held us slaves, end quote. Hiram Rhodes' life spanned a period of extraordinary upheaval and transformation in American history. Born into the constrained freedom of the antebellum South, he pursued education and ministry against all odds, served his nation during its greatest crisis, and rose to become a symbol of a reconstructed republic. His presence in the United States Senate, occupying the seat once held by the Confederate President Jefferson Davis, was a potent emblem of the revolutionary potential unleashed by the Civil War and the possibility of an interracial democracy where citizenship and political power were not the exclusive domain of white men. Senator Charles Sumner saw Revels' seating as the moment the nation finally began to make the Declaration of Independence a reality for all. During his brief term, Revels advocated for the rights, protection, and education of his fellow African Americans while also championing reconciliation. He navigated the treacherous political currents of his time and with a blend of principle and pragmatism, representing the hopes and aspirations of millions seeking to define their freedom. But the revolution remained unfinished. The backlash was intense, and black progress was stifled. Violence, economic coercion, and the waning Northern commitment led to the overthrow of Reconstruction governments and the dawn of the Jim Crow and segregation eras. Revels' own path after the Senate, leading Alcorn University, highlights the enduring importance of black institutions like schools and churches as vital spaces for community building and advancement, especially when formal political avenues were violently closed off. W.E.B. Du Bois captured the bittersweet arc of the era. Quote, the slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again towards slavery, end quote. Hiram Rhodes stood in that sun, a testament of the possibilities of a nation remade. His story and the larger story of Reconstruction compels us to confront the complexities of our past and the enduring struggle for racial justice. As we grapple today with persistent inequalities and ongoing debates about citizenship, voting rights, and the very meaning of American democracy, How do we measure the distance traveled since Hiram Revels walked on that Senate floor? And what does his journey and the unfinished revolution he represented teach us about the work still required to fulfill the promise of liberty and equality for all? Thanks for joining me today. I'll see y'all in the past.